Well, hello everybody. This is another episode from GB News on, in fact, it was yesterday. I'm normally on these days about Sunday about 5 o'clock, and normally against Jim Dale. And one of the things I've found over the years of doing this real climate realism is the other side will simply not debate with us, whether it be climate, Extinction Rebellion, whether it be net zero, whether it be professors from leading universities, whether it be world-leading alarmists. They will not debate. Now, I understand why they don't debate, because basically they haven't got a case. And my particular personal experiences ranges from, leading authors of climate books, professors with worldwide fame, right the way down to other people. Now, Jim Dale, he does debate. Now, I've got to give him this. He's the true alarmist, going on the latest newspaper headlines, and he does debate. But I think the only reason he does debate, and I mean this with the greatest respect, really, is that he doesn't know the subject at all. So those who know a bit of the subject, the alarmists, they won't debate, but Jim will debate because he's going through this not understanding what science is even. So here's another episode, and I will just do a few points as we go through it. The amusing thing is here he uses public survey, so the public, ordinary public, to determine the science somehow. Anyway, welcome to another episode on the Nana Ragua Show.
Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, has declared that net zero was unstoppable despite the President's actions, although his colleague, the Chancellor, has re-pledged to put economic growth before all other considerations, including net zero. So should Labour change course on net zero? Joining me now to debate, climate scientist Paul Burgess, was a senior meteorologist and social commentator Jim Dale. Well, I'm going to start with you. Jim Dale, what do you think? Should they reverse?
No, and we're not alone, okay? Donald Trump has done what he's done. That means 95 countries rather than 96 are signed up to reduce global emissions, which is the stated plan at the Paris Agreement. And within the United States, I should say that many of those states will continue as was. Donald Trump will not have realm over some of these states that will continue to do what the UK is going to do. Also, net zero, what is it at the end of the day? We ban this thing around.
Zero carbon, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an equilibrium. It's so that we don't put more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere or into the ocean, so that we end up with some of the weather stuff that's going on, some of the massive impacts that are going on. That's the idea. Signed up by scientists, by the way. The scientific consensus was reached. It's also UK law, passed by a huge majority in the House of Commons. So Ed Miliband is right. It's not going to be knocked away tomorrow or the next day or next week or even next year. If people need to know about what net zero is, they can go onto the Met Office climate dashboard. It's all written up there. All the scientific papers are there. Or if not, go to the Oxford University net zero consensus on that in terms of their pages. That's Oxford University, one of the top 3 universities in the world. And they will explain the same kind of thing, perhaps better than I can and that we've got.
That was just a word salad of no meaning onto the subject, which is should Labour change their policy. And by the way, what's been mentioned in the intro there is the Chancellor of the Exchequer has said economic growth comes first, because there is a clash. There's a huge clash, because net zero is going to impoverish us. And so these two parts, well, the impoverishment and the popularity of a government in that impoverishment is going to clash with net zero. There's no doubt about that. But just before we go on, he invokes Oxford University there. So let's actually look, before he mentions it, because he's certainly going to mention the latest storm, because he always does. He looks at the latest weather. And so just see what Oxford University says, his source, about storms, for example. Well, Professor Tim Parman was the Royal Society Research Professor in Climate Physics, co-director of the Oxford Martin Programme on Modelling Predicting Climate, and Professional Fellow at Jesus College, Oxford. So what does he have to say? Because apparently we should go to him to ask about storms. Now, whilst Professor Palmer and I would certainly disagree on a lot of climate change issues, we're concerned with the, in this case, using Oxford University as a source to back up things like storms. And as you'll be seeing, Jim does invoke this in a number of times in this conversation. And so the professor says this: "It may be tempting to attribute the exceptional storm Eowyn to climate change," Professor Palmer said. "Whilst climate change is relatively simple and straightforward at the global scale," I disagree with that, by the way, "it gets complicated at the regional scale, where the effects of CO2 interact with the naturally occurring dynamical patterns of climate variability." So he certainly doesn't put it down to CO2, does he? And even the UK State of the Climate report states this: "There are no obvious trends in maximum gust speeds over the last 4 decades in the UK, according to the UK State of Climate report. This is largely due to windstorm numbers being difficult to detect."
Okay, well, you're the meteorologist, which is why I've sort of come to you. But look, just because 95 lemmings say that I'm going to climb over a cliff and go over the edge, you don't have to do it. So, I mean, a lot of people might not buy the argument. Also, years ago, scientists thought that the Earth was flat. Then later on, they realised it was round. So I'm not sure whether I'd always follow the consensus. But Paul Burgess, I saw you shaking your head when Jim was referring to his description of what net zero is. Why?
Yeah. Well, can I just make a point? The question here is, when will Labour change course? They'll have no choice but to change course. If you take NESO, which is the National Energy System Operator set up by Miliband, which is not independent, I've just looked at their report and done a video on it. They're forecasting that the minimum we'll ever get is 4.416 gigawatts. On the 22nd of January last week, in the last 22nd, it was 0.2 of a gigawatt. So they're over 4 gigawatts out. Then on the demand forecast for the peak demand, they're 5 gigawatts out. That's 9 gigawatts difference. We are inevitably heading for blackouts in a modern economy. Yeah. In addition to that, they're going wild on this solar panel thing. And the World Bank has just done a survey of 230 countries, which are the most suitable for solar. And the number 1 is the most suitable one in the world. Number 230 is the worst. Do you know what the UK ranks? 229. No. The 230 is Ireland. We're 229. The Isle of Man, by the way, is 217. So it's absolute nonsense. But what's going to happen is this: as we increase our solar in the middle of the day, that's not a peak time. The peak time is like 5 to 7 in the evening. So the peak time will be in the winter, cold spell, high overwind, 5 to 7 in the evening. Solar contributes nothing. And in fairness, NESO say it'll contribute nothing to the peak. Well, what it will do is shove all the gas out the way or the wind out the way. Now, when it shoves a high wind, if you got wind with that at all, you're going to have to pay the compensation payments. And they now, according to Octopus Energy, will be £6 billion in the next 4.5 years. £6 billion a year just to pay people to switch off.
Well, I was going to say that Ed Miliband, I think it was it 400 million or how much it was?
It was $1 billion. It was $1 billion last year.
Well, I thought, but recently they paid 400 million, I think it was, to a wind farm company or wind farm companies to stop the wind farms from turning. So because we just have surplus of energy, it's not going to work.
No.
And it's an economic bonus. By the way,
hold on. It's not. No. I'm saying that we had to pay those companies millions to turn the turbines off, and we're doing that. And this is not a question. So I'm just not.
You in our previous conversations have said this is an amalgamation between oil, gas, nuclear, and renewables. Renewables is the new baby, relatively speaking, and it's accelerating bit by bit. And we're going in that direction. Nobody's sitting here saying oil's going to disappear tomorrow. Now, what Paul's doing is muddying the waters. He's using the tactics of the tobacco industry when they used to muddy the waters about cancer. Exactly the same path is being trod by climate deniers. And by the way, you're also out of step with the British public. So a 10,000 person Yale program poll brought out just at the end of 2024, 75% said that of the UK people said that it was mostly down to human causes. That's what's happening with climate change. 80% said they were somewhat worried. 85% said it would harm future generations. Now that's UK people speaking.
But Jim, it depends what question you ask people. If you say to somebody, do you support the idea of less carbon and don't really want the planet to heat up? Most people would say, yeah, I support it, but they don't get the details. If you then said, if you support it with wind turbines, this, that, and the other, then your answer, I suspect, would be very different.
I think the poll was taken in the way that most polls are taken, in a fair way, and it was a responsible questioning. So when you ask people, will this harm the future, yes or no, and 85% say yes, that's a categoric answer. People are not stupid.
No.
They're not stupid. They recognise what happened with tobacco and cancer. They're also recognising what's happening with climate change deniers. And as I said last week, welcome Paul, the fact that he's actually turned up, because Reform UK are missing completely. I need something.
Enough of the name calling. No name calling. Paul Burgess.
Look, I don't go on the public in the street to ask about science. I go on things like take the recent weather, for example. I can show that the Journal of Geophysical Research did research in 2021. I tell you that it's absolutely normal what's been happening with the polar vortex, which caused this wind in effect. So in actual fact, I go on the science. So I don't ask people in the street who've been brainwashed, by the way, by the system. And last week he would say 98% of politicians agreed. That's meaningless. I've just pointed out something for everyone to know. NESO, Millie Mann's little baby to operate this system, has got the maths wrong. They've said we'll never have less than 4.4 gigawatts. The actual fact, within a week of that, it's 0.2 of a gigawatt. Now, I've just told you something there, that we would have major blackouts, and we are going to have major blackouts. So I haven't put my head on the block. We are going to have, and that may change that opinion that he's talking about. But I don't go on opinion. Let me finish. I go on the engineering in this case. This is engineering, Jim. I go on the engineering and the physics and facts. I go on not on opinion.
So apart from storms making the blackouts, those tremendous storms, Ireland seeing its greatest storm this century so far.
These claims about the biggest since this, the biggest since then, are often quite absurd. If you look at storms in Ireland, for example, and what he claimed there, this was the biggest storm of this century so far. Well, yeah, but there were bigger storms or equal storms in previous centuries. Here, for Ireland, one night was known as the Night of the Big Wind, with 115 mile an hour gusts, etc. And that was in 1839. The facts are that storms aren't getting worse. And if you look at hurricanes, if you look at a global scale, they're actually in slight decline.
Okay, those are where the blackouts are. We've had net zero blackouts as far as renewable. You are muddying the waters, you're greying the sands, you're doing everything.
Let him respond. You said muddying the waters, and you also laughed when he said about Ireland.
What was this wind? It was a polar vortex over America. The Journal of Geophysical Research did research in 2021. The first polar vortex was noticed in 1853. It caused a huge cold spell, which you know about over America. That squashed the jet stream, as it were, coming in from the Caribbean, which caused a very big, powerful jet stream, which was really low, coming up. That squashed caused a big twirl in the energy underneath it, and a big cyclone. That's what caused it. That has been going on for hundreds of years, and that's what the research shows. And Jim speaks in terms of consensus, no meaning in science. Consensus.
We can
and he speaks in terms of politicians, no meaning. I speak on science and engineering.
Hold on, Jim. What do you say to that? You're saying he's talking drivel about the polar vortex.
As far as that particular storm is concerned, time will tell whether that had a climate inducement within it or not.
But Jim, what's it a polar vortex that caused the wind?
It was a polar vortex dislocation over the United States. Okay, it didn't happen over there. The seeds were set over there, and what happened is it crossed the Atlantic. That's when it deepened tremendously. And we've seen that before, but these storms are getting worse and worse. Just look around.
It's not going to leave. I'm going to leave it there because we've ended on agreement. The polar vortex caused the winds. Thank you very much. Paul Burgess, and senior meteorologist Jim Dale. Thank you very much. Climate scientist Paul Burgess.
Well, I'll end this video by just explaining that a bit better, maybe. The polar vortex, which is this huge cold patch coming down because the jet stream's lowered over North America, that is contrasting with the Caribbean warm air coming up, if you like, the jet stream coming up there, and the warm against the cold. So if the gradient of warm against cold, the difference is big, then you get a lot of weather, because weather's all about difference between one place and another, whether it be pressure, whether it be temperature. It's all about difference. So that big difference there caused the jet stream to be very powerful coming up. That high jet stream coming up with the turning of the Earth, the Coriolis effect, that coming up actually caused a big cyclone. So that is what happened. And that just hit off island. It could have been worse, actually. It could have hit more towards the centre. By the way, that 1839 storm I referred to also wrecked hundreds of houses and things all over Cheshire and England and so on. So that was a big one, And it's meaningless in a way, whether it's 115 miles an hour gust or 118, because that's just pot luck at that spot, what you detect. But the storms have been there all the time. And all Jim lives on every week is the latest weather. That's all he lives on. There's no scientific study. And in previous weeks, he invoked 98% of parliamentarians, of MPs, are in support of net zero. I don't believe that's true. And the other one is now apparently 75% of the British public. That is not a scientific argument. Paul Homeward from the site, not a lot of people know that. I'll put a link in the description to this site. It's a very good site. He wrote, "Do you remember the great Boxing Day storm of 1998? A powerful storm struck Scotland on December the 26th, 1998, causing widespread damage across the country. And as it hit Ireland, forecasters at the time said it was the most rapid pressure drop ever recorded. 6 electricity companies in Great Britain declared a systems emergency as a result of the damage. The storm had already brought 110-mile-an-hour winds to Northern Ireland. The highest gusts there last week were 92 miles per hour at Killerwain. As for Scotland, the Met Office reported gusts of over 100 miles an hour in places, and apart from the 100 miles an hour measured on a hilltop, nowhere got anywhere near 90 miles an hour during Eowyn. According to the Met Office at the time, storms like the Boxing Day one were likely to occur every 4 years on average, somewhere or other in Britain. Common events, in other words. And by the way, even though it's snowing in Florida, that does not mean to prove in any way that it's cooling. I think it is cooling, but weather events cannot be taken in isolation. You have to look for a pattern. That's what climate is. Jim still has to learn that. Thank you for watching.